Hey, Brian Castle here. Welcome back to my series on creating an explainer video. I'm using Screenflow, a couple of other tools along the way. And once again, you are watching me work in real time here. I recorded all this footage as I went along in creating this real explainer video that I'm using for my real product called Process Kit. So we're going to pick up right where we left off and begin to add visuals and graphics and animations to the first section of the video. Let's get into it. All right, we're moving on. So now we're going to get into the actual visuals of this explainer video. And in Screenflow, the first thing that I'm going to do is try to set the background to the color that I want. What I usually do is just to actually create a shape because actually the background is going to change quite a bit. So, having a shape in the timeline helps with that. So I'm going to go to this, they call it annotations, the pencil icon. I'm going to click that. That adds a thing there. And then you can create a shape just like that. And what this does is it kind of puts this thing on the timeline, which is where this shape exists. I'm going to recolor it and change its size in just a minute. I'm going to drag it down to the beginning. Actually, I'm just going to really work with the beginning section for now. First thing before I change the color is I'm going to change the size. I usually try to bleed it out a little bit beyond the canvas size, just so that I know for sure that I won't see any like black lines on the edge of the videos. I've made that mistake a couple of times. And then the color. So when it comes to the color, I try to think about where is this video actually going to be played? And in this case, it's going to be played on the homepage of Process Kit. Here's a look at that homepage. If we scroll down, this is where the person is going to click play from. When they press play, it's going to switch to the YouTube video player. But I actually want to keep this background color in the video itself. That's like the same as this background color down here. And so what I can do is I'm just going to slide this over a little bit. So I will select this. I think I need to double click on the shape itself. Then I can go to colors. It opens up this color picker, and I'm going to use this eyedropper tool to get the exact color that I want. And I'm just going to go down over here and get that background color and do it down here. So now that has set this color down here, but I haven't actually set the color of the shape yet. And for that, you just then click the shape, and it should pop right in. All right, so we have our background color, and then the other thing that I usually try to do at the very beginning is start a starting transition, and that basically just gives it a fade in. I'll show you what that looks like. Your business has a lot going on, okay? So it does that, but I usually try to make it a little bit faster. So I'll zoom in, and I'll take that transition, and I'll cut it down to like just a half a second. Your business has, just like that. Okay. All right, let's work on the first scene of this video, if you will. And I'm going to play the audio so that you can get a feel for the message of what I'm saying. And then I'm going to work through what I'm actually putting up on the screen. Your business has a lot going on. Customer onboarding, deliverables, marketing, hiring, managing, and on and on. All of these projects happening in tandem and sometimes going off on their own tracks. So how do companies grow and scale when there are so many moving parts? Okay, so that is the section that we're going to be putting some animation up on the screen. Okay, so my idea for this is, I'm talking about your business has a lot of things going on, different types of projects, and I want to show different things in your business kind of going on. And I'm going to use some graphics that I already have. I already created these illustrations for the website. I'm going to reuse them for the marketing video. I'm just going to take the graphics that I already have, and I'm going to kind of animate them in the video. Graphics that I'm talking about are on the home page in this like conveyor belt thing where over here on the right side, they turn into these like finished, tried to represent like projects. These are like, could be like a marketing report. It could be like a website, maybe a podcast or an email newsletter or graphics or videos, things that you would do in your business that require a process to do. So I'm going to take these graphics out of my website and pop them into the video. As this idea came together, I ended up with something like this. I'm going to reveal these timeline now. Take a look here. This looks kind of chaotic, but it's going to make sense in a little while. So I took some of those graphics from the website and I laid them out on the canvas like this, so that the screen ends up with a lot of these projects. Some in different sizes than others. They consist of different things, and some are like more in the front and some are more in the back. And the idea as this 15 seconds or so goes on is I want these things to pop into the screen one by one. And then once they're all there, I want them to start to slide across the screen in different directions, right? Because I talk about in the beginning of that, I talked about you have a lot of things going on, marketing, deliverables, onboarding, things like that. And then as I get to the end of it, I start to talk about how they're following different tracks. How can you grow your company when you have a lot of moving parts? So ultimately at the end of this, and sometimes going off on their own tracks. So how do companies grow and scale when there are so many moving parts? So near the last 10 seconds of that section, I'm going to want these rows of projects to be sliding across the screen. And so for that, I created a single graphic, which is like a row of these things. And for that, I basically used a combination of both Sketch and Photoshop. So in Sketch is where I made the initial mock-up for the website. And so I just took the graphic out of that. I had it here. It's in this folder here. I grabbed that folder. I exported it as a PNG. I did the same thing for the marketing report and then the same thing for the website. So I took those 3 graphics, dropped them onto my desktop as PNGs, and then I brought them into Photoshop because for whatever reason, I'm old school. It's just easier for me to create graphics like this in Photoshop. So I took those graphics, I put them into a canvas in Photoshop, and then I laid them out in this long row like that. And I sort of scattered them up so that, I don't have the same one back to back, made sure that they have an equal space in between. And then I exported this as one long PNG file. And then that file I imported into Screenflow. And so that file is here. And then I just have multiple instances. If I look at the timeline, I'll zoom out on the video so you can see the timeline and the video. There's this one, this one, this one. Those are the 3 that are like sort of in the front, and the middle one is a little bit bigger than the other 2. And then behind that, I have 2 more, one back here and one back here. And for those 2 in the back, I reduced the opacity to 50% so that they're sort of like fading in the background. And the ones in the front have full opacity, and I applied a very subtle drop shadow. So I checked the box for drop shadow, gave it just 8% opacity, and I made the blur size pretty big. So I'm going to zoom in on this so that you can see that the ones in the front have this sort of an effect of being on top of the ones in the back. So if I were to get rid of that, it's very subtle, but it just adds a little bit of depth to it, right? Okay, so now I sort of have like the destination of what I want the screen to get to. I ultimately want these graphics to end up in this configuration so that I can start to animate them left and right. And I'm going to show that part in just a second. But how do I get them onto the screen? Because I don't want the beginning of the video to just be like, boom, here's all this stuff on the screen. I want to have these pop in one by one, right? Now to do that, I'm doing a little bit of trickery here, right? All right, so I cut ahead in the project, and to show you how I made that transition from popping in the individual graphics to those rows that will slide across the screen. So we had the one row graphic that I showed before. Then I brought in the individual graphics. There was 3, and then one was sort of like a reversed version of that. So I have these 4 graphics, right? I brought them in individually, and then I dropped them individually onto the canvas so that they basically overlay exactly the spot where the other one was. So just to show you what I mean by that, I already had the rows in place, right? And then let's take this one for example. I brought it in, and then I resized it. Now this is a very tedious part of the project, but I think it goes a long way. So I brought it in and try to line it up just exactly. And a little trick that I do to be able to do it exact is first I will make the opacity lower, like 50% or so. So then I can see exactly where it lines up. I'm going to zoom in on that. Again, I'm looking at it right here. And you can try to line it up just exactly. And then I'll use the arrow keys to get it exact. And once you get it to a point where it is, So this part is very tedious. Once you get it to a point, you can use the keys to make small edits. Once you get it to a point where it doesn't look blurry, so if I go to left, it's blurry, right, it's blurry, up, it's blurry, down, it's blurry, but right in the middle, it's not. So then that means that it's right in line. So I'll bring the opacity back up. And so now I have that one graphic that is overlaying on top of the other one. I added that little drop shadow to it. So I brought the offset down to basically 0, opacity like 9%, and I made the box size like 47 or so. What's going to happen is the row is going to appear like it's going to start by this individual one popping into the screen, and then it's going to transition to that basically disappearing and creating the illusion that it popped in, but the row will take over. And since I sized it up exactly and I gave it the same exact drop shadow, it's going to look seamless, like it just popped in and then it started shifting across the screen. And so once I did that one, I found the other instances of the same graphic, and I just duplicated it so I didn't have to resize it again. There were like 3 more of those. And then I did the same thing for the other graphics here. For each of these individual graphics, I have versions of them that are standalone so that I can add the animation to pop them into the screen. Again, that took a little bit of time to get each individual one sized up, but yeah, that's what I did. All right, so now that I have finished, dropping in each of those individual graphics to overlay the ones that are in the rows, now I ended up with a whole bunch of new tracks in the editor, one for each individual graphic that I dropped onto the canvas. And when you get a lot of tracks like this, it actually gets easier if you use the option to detach the timeline into its own window. And I have 2 monitors here, which makes it easy. So usually I put the timeline on my other monitor. But just to show you what's going on here, I'm going to make this bigger. And this looks kind of crazy, but I've got my audio down here. I've got that background, just the shape in the background down here. And then all of these are the individual graphics on the timeline. And you can see as I select each one, a different one is being selected. Now, what I need to do is make it so that these individual graphics pop into the screen one by one, and maybe sort of at a random scattering until eventually they all end up on the screen in this exact configuration. So how am I going to do that? Well, let me zoom out on this a little bit. First, I want to take the rows. Again, these 5 down here are those long rows that will eventually be sliding across the screen. I want that sliding effect to start kind of midway through this section. So I think that's around here when I said, let me play it. Managing and on. All of these projects happening in tandem and sometimes going off on their own tracks. All right, so when I start saying all of these projects happening in tandem, that's when I want the sliding across the screen effect to begin. And everything before that is going to be the popping in of the graphics. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to first select all of these and have them start right there. And then I'm going to select the other ones. I can drag like that and have those start from the beginning and then transition to there. So let's see what we have so far, and let's take a look. Your business has a lot going on. Customer onboarding, deliverables, marketing, hiring, managing, and on. All of these projects happening in tandem and sometimes going off on their own tracks. All right, so did you see what happened there? It might have been kind of subtle, but at the beginning, so currently we're seeing these individual graphics. And then when we get to managing and on, all of these projects right there, now we're no longer seeing the individual graphics. We're only seeing the rows version of the graphics. And so with the exception of the background ones, and we're going to deal with those a little bit later, you really didn't see, it was a very seamless transition. It's kind of like an invisible trick where we go from, this individual graphic to the same thing, but part of the row. So that's kind of cool, right? Like we're gonna do some like kind of trick camera work here. But now what we need to do is make these individual ones like actually animate and pop into the screen one by one. So let's get into that a little bit. So the first thing that we're gonna do is just let's choose which one we want to actually pop into the screen first. And I think I'm gonna start with the one that's in the very center of the canvas. I'm gonna select that, and that means that we're selecting this track. And for the rest of them, I'm gonna move them, I'm gonna have them start a little bit later. So I'm gonna slide the start time like that. And so now when we begin, we should only have the one.
Your business has a lot going on.
All right, so let's start with those first few seconds, and we want this one to, we're gonna have the background fade in, and then we're gonna have this one pop in. What I want to happen here is I want it to kind of start from nothing and then grow and then end up at its correct size. Basically, it's going to start from 1% scaled down up to, so at its full size, this is actually 75% scaled for this graphic. The ones in the middle, the bigger ones, are 75%. The ones at the top row and the bottom row are actually 37%. But for the ones in the middle, the 75, we want to go from 1 up to 100 and then down to 75 so that it gives that pop effect, right? So what we're going to do is add a video action. I'm going to click action, and then that adds this little yellow thing, which basically symbolizes like we're going to go from one state to a different state. And I'm going to bring the timeline back to the beginning of it, and I'm going to set its scale down to 1. And so it's essentially invisible, right? Because it doesn't allow you to put 0 in for scale for some reason. We're going to go to the end of that, exactly at the end of this, and you have to make sure that the yellow, that this is selected, right? If it's purple, then you're not actually doing anything. So you have to make sure that this is selected, it's yellow. We have the timeline at the end of it. At the end of this first animation, we want it to go up to 100. And let's just see what we've done so far. I'm going to go back to the beginning.
Your business has a lot going on.
So did you see that? It went, your business has a lot. So it grew from 1 up to 100. But now we have to do the last piece of that animation. We're going to add a second one. I'm going to hit action again to add another one of those blocks. Go to the beginning of that block. This time we want to start at 100 and then go to the end down to 75. All right, so let's take a look at that.
Your business has a lot going on.
All right, let's see one more time so you can see what happened.
Your business has a lot going on.
See how it grew and then it got smaller a little bit. All right, so that was kind of cool, but it's a little bit too slow, right? It doesn't have the pop effect. So we want to make it faster by just decreasing the duration. So the first one should be about that, maybe a little bit less. And then the next one has to start right when that one finishes, and it should be even faster on that last piece. And you can zoom in to get a little bit more fine-grained control on that. Let's take a look.
Your business has a lot.
All right, that's pretty good. One more look.
Your business has a lot.
Maybe that ending one is a little bit too fast. How about that?
Your business has a lot.
All right, cool. So we've got the pop effect going on that first graphic. Now we've got to do it for the rest of them. So we started with the center one, and then I kind of want them like coming in from like different angles. So you want to choose, let's just choose the second one. We did the middle one first, so let's go with this one up here, and we'll add the same effect. It's going to go from 1 to 55 because this is a smaller one, and then from 55 down to 37. Let's see how we're doing.
Your business has a lot going on.
All right, so we've got that second one popping in right there. Cool. All right, so now it's just a matter of doing the same exact thing for each individual one, and I'm going to cut here and come back when that's all done. All right, so let's see how we're doing. I'm going to press play from the beginning.
Your business has a lot going on. Customer onboarding, deliverables, marketing, hiring, managing, and on and on. All of these projects happening in tandem and
Okay, so I think that's looking pretty good. I'll show you what that looks like. I'll detach the timeline so you can see. I showed you the first two of those transitions. That was like this one and maybe that one. And then I did the same thing for all the rest of them. And then I basically scattered the start time for each one. And I worked with that a little bit to get just the right feel for when each one should enter the picture. I started kind of slow, and then more are kind of dropping in as time goes on until we get to about the 7-second mark. And that's when all of them are now there. And then we seamlessly transition into that version of those graphics, which are just the rows. And in a minute, we're going to have those rows start to animate across. So let's work on this transition part for just a second, because there was one detail that I didn't quite like, and that was, let me put this back. That was this background row, which doesn't really do anything. It just sort of suddenly appears. I'll show you that. I'm going to press play.
Hiring, managing, and on. All of these projects.
Did you see how it just kind of popped in with no sort of transition? So what I want to do is kind of fade those in so that they subtly just show up in the background, right? I'm going to find those two graphics, and that's this one and this one. And I'm going to add a starting transition. And I'm going to use the cross blur because that one is a little bit more subtle. And the same with this one. I'll make it cross blur. And let's have that stretch out to a good amount of time, 1.6 seconds. That's kind of a long fade in, but that's fine because we almost don't want the viewer to even notice. We just want it to sort of appear in the background. Let's go back and take a look.
Hiring, managing, and on. All of these projects happening in tandem and sometimes going off on their own.
Cool. So you probably almost didn't even notice that, but the ones in the background just kind of dissolved, just kind of faded right in there. Cool. So now my next step is to make these things start to slide across in different directions. All right, and the way that we're going to do that is by using those video actions once again. So I'm going to select one of these rows. I'll select the top one first, add a video action. That adds the little block here. And this time I'm going to extend it to the entire length of this section. The transition or the movement that's going to happen is not, this time we're not going to change the scale, but this time we're going to change the position. So it's going to begin where it currently is, where it basically picks up from the individual graphics. And then at the end of it, we want it to end up in a different position. So we want it to slide across. So we're going to move it. This top one, I'm going to have it move this way. So I'm going to move it to a different direction. And I'm using my arrow keys on this just to make sure that it stays exactly at the vertical spot, but just the horizontal spot is going to be different. So I'm going to move it to, let's say, here. And let's see how that looks.
All of these projects happening in tandem and sometimes going off on their own tracks. So how do companies grow and scale?
Kind of cool, right? All right, so now let's do the same thing for the other ones. I'm going to do this one now, and let's have this one move in the opposite direction. I'm going to add the video action, extend it to the entire length. I'm going to go all the way to the end, and this time we're going to move it this way. All right, and we'll take a look.
All of these projects happening in tandem and sometimes going off on their own tracks.
Cool. So now we're going to do the same thing for all 5 of these rows, including the ones in the back. And I'm going to cut here and skip to that. Okay, I'm back. So now I have finished the transitions to make all of them slide in different directions. Let's take a look at and see what that looks like.
On. All of these projects happening in tandem and sometimes going off on their own tracks. So how do companies grow and scale when there are so many moving parts?
Pretty cool, right? And what I tried to do not only was to vary up the different directions, but also the speed. Some of them are going faster than others to give it even a little bit more randomness to it. Okay, let's pause right there, and we will pick right back up in the next video where I will start to add text and other graphics and other animations and transitions to the middle part of the video. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you find this useful, and I will see you in the next video.